We're passing the mic this week to our sound editor, Micah.
Yeah, listen to Micah talk about being a queerspawn and growing up in a queer family. It's amazing content. So listen up.
And you might even get to hear them talk later in the season. My, how exciting. Enjoy the episode.
All the thoughts and opinions of the performers and creators are theirs and theirs alone, and do not reflect the opinions of the queer or queerspawn community.
In 1943, I was called to serve in the army at Camp Borden. We left Winnipeg with nothing on our backs except the prairie dust kicking up from the tracks. The night before, we all stood in line.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your humble host, Micah Champagne. I'm so glad you could join me today. This is going to be a follow-up show to the short story I wrote a couple years ago for the Queerspawn anthology collection called Spawning Generations. The piece was called My Life as a Play and is on page 42. This show is going to be a little different in both style and format from the first piece, but don't let that deter you. Today we're going to have an interview with my brother, a deep examination on Queerspawn experience, and some wonderful music. But before we get to all that, let's do a recap. I was born in 1993 to two women named Jan and Lois. I was conceived through artificial insemination by an anonymous sperm donor. I add this detail mostly for the queer parents in the audience. Shortly after I was born, my family was in a very bad car accident in which my mother Lois was killed. I was a baby at the time of the accident, so I have no memories of it or of Lois. My first memories are that of my mother and me living in a small women's co-op in Toronto. When I was 6.5 years old, a young boy moved into our co-op. I crashed his 7th birthday party with one of the other boys from our neighborhood. The new boy's name was Josh, and after forming a very quick and strong friendship, our mothers met, and within a year, we were living together in one apartment. A couple years later, in 2001, our mothers Miriam and Jan got married in a small garden of a friend, but by that time, me and Josh were already calling each other brothers for a while. Around that time, I also met Josh's father, Jeff, who was Miriam's ex-husband. After several meetings with Jeff, he welcomed me into his family and into his home. And me and Josh would often spend every second weekend of our childhood at our father's house. I love my family, and I would have it no other way. And this is my family, and this is the story I told. I wanted to tell my family story and my story in part one, because I wanted to showcase what families could look like, and that they're valid and completely like any other family. But it's also the story that I'm most familiar with telling. It's the easiest one for me to convey. And I think that with this piece, I wanted to tell a little bit of a deeper side to having queer parents and to the story itself. I think everyone has a version of themselves that they present to the world, the one that we practice through retellings till it's perfect. And when you come from a non-typical family like my own, I think that there's this pressure to prove that your family works, that it is the perfect version of what a family could be, and that you turned out all right because your parents were good parents. I find that I become and I'm pushed into the role of the spokesperson for all queer families in any conversation. And if I take one wrong step, I feel like I delegitimize queer families in the eyes of the world. And that pressure follows me in most social situations. And it's always like in small moments when like some friend of a friend at a party says, "Oh, you have like two moms? Like they're your real parents? That's weird." And you have to take a step back and not act in frustration, because in that moment, you are now representing all queer families. So you always have to answer with grace to justify your own existence and your family's existence, and that queer families work. But I didn't get to choose my family any more than anybody else did. I didn't wake up one morning like, ooh, a family sampler, how delightful. Oh, this one seems fun. Oh, it comes with a side of homophobia? Fantastic. If I get one for the table, will everyone share? I wouldn't want it any other way. I love my family. I just didn't choose it. Nobody did. No one got to choose their parents or the circumstances in which they were born. And especially as a child, those things are so far outside of your control. You inherit the circumstances. And when you're from a queer family, you inherit the homophobia and the misunderstanding and the fear. For example, we don't really talk to my mom Jan's family. I haven't seen them since my grandmother died when I was about 8. They made their choice a really long time ago, before I was born, and that carries to this day. We inherit a lot from our family. Small habits, humor, preferences for 30-year-old sci-fi, and we as Queerspawn inherit homophobia. We inherit ignorance. We just don't necessarily inherit the community. However, we inherit the pressure to represent the community. When we're kids, I think we're showcased as a product of queer families, that queer families can do anything as much as a heterosexual family. But when we grow up, there's not room in the queer spaces for us as adults. And so often there's a disconnect or a lack of representation for Queerspawn. It's hard to feel seen in any community, whether it's the heterosexual community or the queer community. This is just my experience. Each of my 3 parents and army of grandparents that raised me are some of the most incredible people I've ever met. They're loving and supportive, but just as my family is a little bit more complicated than most, so are some of the things that we have to navigate. Thank you for sticking through that rant. We're going to head into our first song break, but stick around because after we're going to have my esteemed guest, Joshua Zachariah, my very own brother, to continue the conversation. All this and more, but here's Sea Blue with Human off the album Ventures, courtesy of Cassius Sounds.
Couldn't help but notice your t-shirt's inside out. Did you do it on purpose? It looks kinda wow. You look at me like I'm walking upside down. I'm sorry you think that. You know I'm afraid of clowns. They make me cry. You make me laugh, wanna see you cry. You make me laugh when I see you cry. So check if you're human, are you? Human, are you? Human, are you? Human. Goodbye to all those hot chocolate nutties, radio replays and infantile travesties. Goodbye to all those hot chocolate melodies, radio replays and infantile travesties. When you walk my way, would you pull my hair and tie my hands to prove you care? Okay, let's go. Yeah. So say hello to these overly caffeinated reveries. Put that record on repeat. I'm drowning in the memories. Say hello to these overly caffeinated reveries. Put that record on repeat. I'm drowning in the memories. Say hello to these overly caffeinated reveries. Put that record could not but notice your t-shirt's inside out. Did you do it on purpose? I could not but notice your t-shirt's inside out. Oh, that's not
Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to the studio, my brother, Joshua Zachariah.
Great studio.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my tiny living room studio. Yeah, I just wanted to start, I guess, like, at the beginning of this, I did a little bit of a recap of kind of the first project. And I wanted to start kind of generally at the beginning, because I don't think we've talked about it too much, but, like, I don't think we grew up with the term Queerspawn being, like, a big thing.
I feel like it got invented by kind of our
Yeah, by our generation of, yeah. So, like, what's your opinion on that? Like, do you think you fit in that umbrella?
Well, I think growing up, I always felt like I didn't have the same claim on it as other Queerspawn did.
Right.
Because, you know, like I think two things. Like, one, having, like, being born to a heterosexual, or a couple who at least thought they were heterosexual at the time.
Sure.
And, you know, and having kind of both of those parents stay in my life. And then the other, which I think we might talk about this later as well, but my mother being bi and that whole relationship that I think the LGBTQ community has, different parts of it have had with being bi not being as kind of like legitimate of a thing.
Right.
So I think, yeah, I felt like in comparison to a lot of the Queerspawn, and I didn't grow up around in that community as much
Right.
as I feel like you did. Didn't have the same connections to that world because my mom wasn't as much of a part of that as, say, Jan was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and we've talked about this, but that I think a lot of my feeling like I belonged in that world more legitimately is more around just the, you know, you get bullied for something. I feel like
Yeah.
you then get some claim over it.
Yeah, certainly, like, and I think that, like, I remember the shift because, yeah, like, I grew up always knowing my mom was gay.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that there was a shift because my mom was a single mom, to, like, oh, she finally has a partner. And, like, I think people, like, latched onto that, and there definitely was a shift to, like, how much bullying was, like, levied.
I also, like, the word spawn, I think, was a piece of it for me, too, because I wasn't spawned by queer.
Right. Yeah, if you want, I mean, it's weird because, like you were saying, like, that bi identity is so already contested, but I think you have a claim to it as much as the rest of us,
yeah,
right?
I
Like,
too, but I think I've had, like, an interesting relationship with
right.
Yeah. You know, which I think you and I both have to a number of identities. Like,
Yeah.
you know, do we get to claim being Jewish, for example?
Yeah.
Right? Another one that's contentious at best for both of us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, and I always, like, I think I wrestle too with, like, how queer do I have to be to identify as queer?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Um,
And what legitimizes that queerdom?
yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
acts, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's like,
totally.
do we need to like go have sex with like someone of the same gender once every like
Yeah,
period of
what's
time?
my queer quota? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like is the queer council gonna come down and be like, well, I don't know. We've reviewed your file.
And you know what's another interesting thing about the word queer? I feel like there's lots of scholarly work on the word queer that I'm not familiar with, but like the word in its original meaning means different, right?
Right.
Sure. I think. And even beyond like our mothers, our family is certainly queer.
Yeah, sure.
In the sense of it's different.
Yeah, I mean, like certainly, I think
different.
queer meaning also otherly and strange, right?
And yeah, it's not. We're certainly not nuclear.
Yeah.
But even Dad certainly doesn't bring nuclearness into the world. Into our world.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like just the whole structure of our family. Like I remember being in like grade 10 and trying to explain it to somebody, like, and having to physically draw it for them because they couldn't get their head around it.
Yeah, still find most people like just kind of get lost.
Yeah. I find they kind of can get the two moms thing, but when you start trying to explain, and then my brother's dad, who was divorced, he's still a parent, and all of his family is my family.
Yeah.
And we go there all the time, and I see him all the time.
Yeah.
And when you start opening that door, people their eyes glaze over.
Well, it also doesn't help that family by itself is just fucking complicated.
Yeah, totally. And then you start explaining that. Yeah. Well, and like I think, and this is certainly a thing. Like I kind of talked about this at the beginning, but for all families that are non-nuclear, like families of divorce or whatever, or you were raised by your grandparents, I think that we all have that like moment where you kind of have to like explain and justify what your family structure is.
And it's funny because you think like how common actually is the nuclear family.
Yeah.
Right? Like I feel like certainly in the world it's the minority. Because, most, like there's just so many different ways to have a family that different cultures have.
Yeah.
But I bet even like just because of divorces or like wacky things happen.
Yeah, sure.
That like even in North America or in Canada, the U.S., that it would be also in a minority. Maybe not. I don't know. There are a lot of nuclear families, but
yeah, it would surprise me. Like, it wouldn't surprise me how like little it actually was present.
Yeah. Everyone's got their wackiness.
Yeah, and certainly like
a little more.
yeah. I think our family structure, and I think like certainly, definitely a lot of the queer families that I know have that, right? Like I think inherently you kind of have that like a little bit more of a wacky family structure, especially because a lot of like you have a lot of family that you've chosen over the like period of your life or whatever, that you're like, these people are the people that I want to be in my family's life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the chosen family as well is a whole other like structure to that. Like the friends and stuff you have around. Like I've always loved how good Jan was at that. At like picking who her family was.
Yeah, Jan's my mom. And yeah, she was always really good at like, I think setting that boundary, whatever that boundary was, right? Like being like, this is exactly what I want it to feel like.
Yeah.
Especially because like, my mom lost the person she thought she was going to raise me with, right?
Yeah.
And so like, and I think like, she needed that support system to like to do it. And I was like not an easy kid.
No, and neither of us were.
No.
And like, yeah, again, to the chosen family, like to the degree to which like we chose each other and constructed that family.
Yeah. Certainly, like me and you definitely chose each other. Like we, like from day one, we're like, yeah, this is the person. Like,
it's always the queerness of like our household.
Yeah.
Is like because of that, like that relationship adds to a lot of the differentness of our family that like we fucking parent trapped.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, for sure. We're just like, okay, we're gonna hang out all the time, and then our moms are gonna get together. Yeah. Yeah. I like the we parent trapped is like. Do you like how often do you think like having queer parents affects you now like you're an adult? Not affects, but you know what I'm saying. How often do you think it comes up in your life?
In what sense?
Yeah, I mean like
right, it comes up in the sense that I was like became the person I am today, and
right,
and that it was every day. But like, how often do I think about it? How often, like, okay, let's say in like I would say the most common way it comes up is like I think both of us, we're essentially doing this now, like to tell our story.
Yeah.
Right. In like a social gathering or something, being like, look at how interesting we are.
Sure.
Or at least I certainly do, because ego problems. And so like it comes up in that sense. It's
right.
Like where I talk about it.
And like you find that that's like a point of like pride, like that you bring in.
It's a point of pride.
Right. You're like, my family is interesting, and
Yeah.
Yeah. I it's weird. I often find that I have to defend it, like that I'm bringing it up often to be like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine. Look how well my queer parents did. I'm okay.
Yeah, I guess I haven't had. Who do you find you're defending it
to? Like certainly, like it's always like like little moments where it's like, oh, you had like 2 queer parents. That's like weird, or it's like I find that I'm often like I make fun of them a lot. That's just the way we like, and so I find that like sometimes I'll like make a lot of jokes and basically like be joking like my parents are so hippie and like the open like circles just to have a family dinner, like making jokes, and then someone will be like take that too far, and I'm like no they're great. Like, and I gotta backpedal from that.
Yeah I find I have to do backpedaling around ways in which they are strange. And like things that people kind of don't get, but their gayness isn't often a part of that.
Right.
I don't think.
Like, not that I've never seen it as a point of pride, because I quite like our parents, but I've never brought it up being like, oh, this is like my family's. I just want like, why do you think that that's the thing you bring up?
It's a good question. It often comes up around conversations around queerness, I guess, in general. And I guess I use it as a way to legitimize my place in the conversation.
Right. Yeah.
Like my own, I've always felt my own bi-ness was inadequate to legitimize my place in the conversation.
Right.
Which is a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah.
But, and in some ways, is it as part of, I've often felt there was a performative piece of my life and my story that I'm willing to give people.
Right. Yeah.
And they are almost, they being gay is almost part of that. It's part of that narrative I'm willing to give people.
Right.
Whereas my own queerness isn't as much.
Me too. Absolutely. Like, I definitely, like, I think I definitely lead with, like, oh, I have 2 gay moms.
Yeah.
And I'm so far, like, from being like, and I'm also queer. And I also identify, like, I definitely lead with 2 gay moms way faster than I lead with my own queerness. I think it's that, like, separation to be like, I'm in the community and I need you not to, like, talk shit or whatever, or I want to be a part of the conversation, but I'm also not going to directly out myself.
Yeah.
And I think for me, sometimes, especially at, like, work, it comes a little bit more from, like, having that, like, queer danger sense to be like, okay, I gotta, like, feel out who's gonna be cool and who's not gonna be cool. But certainly, like, in more social situations, I think it's just, like, I don't know with you, but certainly sometimes with me, I'm like, it's none of your fucking business what my deal is. But, like, yeah, I think it's exactly what you were saying is, like, but I want to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. Because we have something to say about it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, and we went through, like, a difficult time because of our parents' queerness.
Yeah.
Right? Like, kids suck.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, yeah, you inherit that, like, ignorance, right? Like, like, when we were 8, we didn't have the concept of, like, and we are bi, but we still inherited that homophobia. And I think, like, you know, a lot, like, it's inherited, like, a lot of communities inherit that. And certainly, like, it's, like, I think it's, like, the queer community is one of those, like, that you take on that ignorance for your parents sometimes. Not for them, just because that's the way the world is. Like, it's not their fault to just, like, it's nobody's fault. We just didn't choose it, right? Like, I didn't go, like, one day, like, oh yeah, please, I'd love the, like, the ignorance sampler. You know, that would be like, you know, I'll get some for the table. It'll be great.
Yeah, sure. Get a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do you, like, I definitely think that in a weird way, like, having to deal with homophobia in school and, like, having to deal with a lot of that bullying, like, has made me better at dealing with it. Like, has made me, like, a little bit strong, like, thicker skinned as a person. And, like, I think that's easy to say for someone who doesn't deal with a lot of...
Hello, Micah from the future here, just jumping in to say that there was a little bit of an audio issue while recording the interview, and so there's going to be a little bit of a gap, and then we'll jump right back into the episode.
Yeah.
You know what? I've been thinking about that a lot. Actually, something I was talking about in therapy only this last week. I think there's a general idea around this, like, you know, people who are like more interesting adults were like bullied as kids, and you know, and it like there's like this toughened you up, and there's this like I don't know, but I wonder how much we excuse shittiness from people on that kind of basis. Like
Right.
it's still not it's still not okay that we like
Yeah.
that there are bullies, and that's not how you make like interesting people.
Totally.
And like I would like because if that's the if we need bullying to get like interesting tough adults, it's like I don't want to have a kid who gets bullied. That's
Yeah, like suffering does not equal
yeah,
like
we shouldn't require suffering of people.
yeah. Totally.
I don't think suffering should be required to like become like a full healthy individual.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, because it legitimizes shitty people, and I don't think we should legitimize shitty people.
Yeah, I think what I like, certainly for me, it's like, how do I own? I think my own like bullying and like own like feeling upset.
Mm-hmm.
About it and be okay, like, and still not legitimize, like, oh yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't enjoy that. That was nice.
Yeah.
But certainly, like, I definitely, like, still to this day, like, you know, I still get, like, little homophobic microaggressions. And certainly, like, I think they're a little bit more connected to my own sexuality, which is, I think, why I'm a little guarded about it.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, definitely, like, it's connected to our parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like, yeah, that's still something that, like, I'm always going to have to put up with that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, like, you know, what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Go for it.
So I wanted to kind of loop back to like our meeting and our kind of construction of that, you know, of that family. And I realized the other day when I was thinking about it, do you have clean memories of, say, that first week?
No.
After we met? I don't either.
Not good ones.
I kind of have a memory of the birthday party.
I definitely have. I'm not sure how much that is a memory of the picture that is all of us on the stoop, or is it actual memories of that happening? I definitely remember the piñata.
I have a pretty clear picture in my head of you showing up at the back door with Carl.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I think it's a legitimate memory is because so I have like a lot of memories where I'm not entirely sure if it's because someone told me a story.
Yeah.
And then I insert it. But one of the reasons why I've often thought this was a legitimate one is because it's from the right height.
Yeah, sure.
Like it's a first person from the right height, so I feel like it might have been like actually me remembering it. But then I go straight from that to essentially you guys moving in. I have this gap in my head sometimes of that like initial friendship. Me
too. I think it's just I've spent so much time in my brain being like, oh, Josh is my brother. So it's like
I felt like we kind of became brothers even before. Like there was just some dotting the I's and crossing the T's that kind of had to happen.
Totally. And I think like I don't know. I always that space is just inputted by we were already there.
Yeah.
And I know there was a period of time where we were becoming friends.
Yeah.
But kids
Like hanging out with Dylan.
sure,
and stuff.
but kids are so good at that. I think
Yeah.
about like that immediacy of being like, and you're my best friend now.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah, like I think there's like a lot of that I miss of like that incredible amount of trust
yeah,
that like that we could bring to bear.
yeah.
That like I don't know if I can get even remotely that close again in my life.
It's so crazy. Like the more and more I talk about like, because the first beginning of this project was like 4 years ago when I first wrote the piece, and it just gets more and more complicated. Like as I get like life just gets slightly more complicated as you get older.
Yeah,
Where-
entropy.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, no, that's
Well, kind of.
Entropy is the opposite. Never mind.
But I get what you're saying, where it just keeps getting like kind of expands,
Yeah.
and and I think for kids like it's like, oh, this is the thing. Okay, great. I just want
Mhm.
the thing I want.
Mhm.
It's that immediacy, and like yeah, and that trust, and I think like there was something about our relationship that we both hitched onto because it was so immediate, right? Like it was very
Mhm. Well, I think we saw, dreamers
yeah,
in each other. Like I mean, like not in the ambition sense, but in the not being entirely satisfied with this reality sense.
yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, like, and storytellers, and like, and I think that ability to craft, and going back to it, like that ability to hone and craft the stories you want to be true about yourself. And like, it's funny because every time I do one of these projects, it's it's always like how is it to be my relationship to being Queerspawn, and it's like that's only one part of who I am as a person. Like there's so many other parts, and I think just the nature of being like the project being about being Queerspawn is it makes it about that.
Mhm.
And not about like the million other
Yeah. I think you've nailed it on the head. Like what I find interesting about our lives
Mm-hmm.
isn't the fact, like, it is interesting that our mothers are gay,
Mm-hmm.
but that's only interesting because society sucks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? That shouldn't actually be, beyond just two people loving each other is wonderful, but it shouldn't be interesting.
Yeah.
Right? That should have just been, two people loving, and then everything else, like the tapestry that makes up our lives and our story is a good one.
Yeah.
But that's just a piece of it.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, like the thing talking about like bringing up parts of our family to be like interesting at parties.
Yeah.
The one I always do is because our dad's house was
Yeah.
very
That house is
chock full of good stories.
Yeah.
Because it was like a lot of people coming in and out all the time.
Songs guy.
Yeah. Like, and so like that's the one I always bring up for like credit, like social credit, to be like my family's wacky.
Yeah.
Is like, oh yeah, my dad had a sauna in the house, and every Monday people would come
it was
over.
a much stranger part of our upbringing.
yeah, and I think sometimes people focus on the like gayness, and I'm like, no. My dad's so wacky.
Yeah. And like in your relationship with him too.
Yeah.
Is like a really quite an interesting piece. Like
Yeah.
speaking of chosen family.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
And like, yeah, he did in no way like, because I remember I have very vivid memories of like meeting him for the first time.
yeah,
And like
that one I remember the subway. I have a very clear
Yeah.
memory of the subway.
Yeah. And like you're like I remember I remember very clearly moments of being like, oh, that's Josh's dad,
Mhm.
and then moments of being like, oh, that's my dad.
Mhm.
And like, I'm always so like he was so. It took a little bit. Like every relation takes a minute, but he was so quick to be like, oh, I have another son now.
Yeah, I've always been so awed and proud
Yeah,
of how much he was willing to, yeah, like
me too.
there's not a lot of men who would
No,
do that for their, ex-wife's
new partner's son. Yeah, I agree. Like, and not only that, it's not like, oh, this is like my stepson or whatever.
Yeah.
It's also like, okay, my ex-wife is now dating a woman.
Yeah.
And her partner's boy is gonna be hanging out with me, and it's like, yeah, no.
Not only is he gonna be hanging out there, it's not like he comes over on weekends. No, we're
Yeah.
bringing him into the whole fucking thing.
Yeah. But also, there's like never a moment where dad was like, this is my stepson.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
never made that delineation.
Yeah.
He was like, this is my son.
Yeah.
And he still to this day introduces me like that. And it's like, no, I'm forever grateful to that. Like, yeah, not a lot of men would have done that. No. Unique in that, like, yeah, and it was in my brain it was immediate, and I know it took months, but like in my brain,
it took a remarkably low amount of time.
Oh, I agree, but like it definitely took a month or two, and in my brain it was like it just jumps.
Yeah,
There's that skip in time.
And it's the funny thing with like how we construct stories and memories. Like when we tell this story, when I like something I think we've talked about before as well is that when I tell our story, like it's almost a recording.
Yeah.
Like there are beats I hit.
Yeah, totally.
There's like places I pause. Like it's a whole fucking thing.
Yeah, it's definitely sculpted.
And it's almost like that has become the memory that we took that like probably legitimately 2-year period.
Yeah.
Maybe a year
and a half.
And then like
condensed
made it a single memory.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it made it one continuous instead of like a bunch of blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the first time, my memory of feeling the first time that you were like fully in that the dad had like fully adopted you was at the cottage.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. No, that's definitely the moment that's the adoption.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Is because I remember being like, can I call you dad?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah.
Yeah, that happened at the cottage.
Yeah, that was at the cottage.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that moment is cemented in my brain.
To our viewers, there's a very fun recording of at that cottage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There is. Is that from the same weekend?
That's the same weekend.
Oh,
yeah.
Jesus. There's a recording of me and Josh making. Our dad had bought like a stop motion camera.
Yeah.
And we were making like stop motion videos, and our dad still has them. They're pretty fun. They're pretty fun.
Yeah.
And he used to bring them out he would show them to everyone who wanted, even who didn't want to see it. He'd be like, you want to see this crazy video my kids made?
Yeah.
Like,
they're pretty fun.
They're pretty good. Like,
they're violent. There's like 3 of them were about like.
Yeah. I remember making them and dad being like, does the dragon have to eat the man?
Yeah.
And we were like, Dad, the dragon has to eat the man.
I think one was also like a sword fight where someone got stabbed.
Someone did get stabbed, yeah.
Violent fucking kids.
Yeah. I think that, like, yeah. I think all kids, like, I think it's all about, like, some amount of control.
For sure. And, like...
Not to get too, like, analytical on it.
And we had our own relationships with, like... like, you know,
But also,
anger
like,
and stuff.
yeah, but also all media is kind of violent, or like a lot of
Yeah.
media.
We like snuck downstairs at like 6 o'clock in the morning every Saturday
Yeah.
to essentially watch violence.
Yeah. Watched like just streams of violent cartoons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which were fun.
Yeah, I mean,
Wouldn't take that back for the world.
no, me either. Yeah, so I think we're gonna wrap up pretty soon, but I just wanted to, like, I think like, if you had to, like, give a piece of advice to, because I think we used to do, like,
Yeah, the panels.
the panels, and we'd always
You
be
know,
like,
it's funny, that's the piece of being Queerspawn that felt the most legitimate in some ways. That
is speaking to other,
or
like,
not feeling the most, that felt the most legitimizing.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna, like, you're legitimately enough in this community that I'm gonna put you on a panel to talk to new members in it.
Yeah, to talk to other queer
That was
people who are
the
trying to
most
be
legitimate
parents.
I ever felt was being on that panel.
I felt the opposite. I felt like under a microscope. Like I had to be constantly, like, good.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, it's different. I get that too. Different one. But yeah.
Yeah, I understand how that would be really legitimizing, though, to, like, have a room, but they were always, like, a room full of, like, incredibly nervous first-time parents
Yeah.
who were like, are we gonna fuck these kids up?
Yeah.
And then to have them, like, literally just sit and do nothing but listen to your story would be, like, yeah. I get why that is, like, really...
But I remember one of the things I used to say was, like, you're going to have all the trials and tribulations of any parent.
Yeah.
And, you know, your queerness, like, is going to be a part of, you know, potentially a part of those difficulties.
Right.
But most of it is just going to be...
The parenting part.
The parenting part, which...
Yeah.
You know, we were fucking like 15 giving those, and I have no real advice to give you.
I remember what I always said was, you've done the biggest step, which is that you're choosing to become a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's great. You've nailed it. Who gets to say that, like, a lot of parents out there don't get to choose to be parents, and that you're actively choosing to be a parent is wonderful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to know, not to focus on the parents, but what do you think, what would you say to, like, the next generation of Queerspawn?
To the kids.
Yeah. Like, all those kids from all those, like, parents at the panel, like, their kids now being, like, 7.
I wonder I don't know, like, I have no sense, like, where society's, like, you know, society's changed a certain amount over the last, you know, decade or two, and I don't know enough about their lives. Like, I don't know what being a Queerspawn today means. Like, maybe it's, you know, maybe it's the same as what being a Queerspawn for us meant.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, like, I guess, like, but yeah, like, but the bit that probably doesn't change, and that, you know, maybe I could speak to is, like, you know, whether you question whether your family is, like, a legitimate structure, and, like, when people tell you it might not be, and that's, yeah, it's fucking hard, and, like, I guess the advice isn't that complicated, but it's easier said than done. It's like, you just gotta hold on to the knowledge that the love you and your family have is legitimate, and is yours, and that's, you know, I find advice like that funny, because it's just like, yeah, well, it's easier said than done when it's like...
Yeah, but that sentiment, I think, doesn't get said enough.
Yeah.
To just really be like, you are legitimate.
Yeah.
And your family is legitimate, and no amount of bullshit is going to take that away from you, even though it feels like it's trying.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
And I guess I hope, that like we've come far enough as a society where many of these kids don't feel illegitimate, but
yeah.
I bet they do.
Yeah, it's always in tiny moments, right?
Yeah.
But no, I think the more and more I grow up, and like it's becomes like I don't live with my parents anymore, so it becomes like less and less a thing I think about, but always a thing I think I hold close to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it still travels with me. It's always going to be a part of the person who I am, but it's not. I think as a kid, sometimes it was the biggest part of who I was,
Mm-hmm.
and now it doesn't have to be. Like I can let go of constantly being like this is the thing, and I will defend it.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
I don't need to cling to that as hard as I think I used to.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and doing this. This was
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like I know when the book was made, you really wanted to come and you wanted to write a piece, and I think you didn't have the words for what you wanted to write.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that this was at least a little bit of a platform for you to say your.
It was. I still don't think I have the words for what I want to say, but this was I'm very grateful for the chance to make an attempt.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming, and I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you again to Josh for coming onto this show. It was such a pleasure to have you. Oh, there's the bell. I guess that means it's feeding time for our dark capitalist overlords. Their empty, bleeding maw drifts ever closer, so please enjoy this ad.
Do you ever feel like there's a piece missing in your life? Do you suffer from bouts of listening to the Indigo Girls on tape? Are you frequently drawn to stores called Witch's Coven, The Great Crystal Hut, or Shiva's Palace? These are the common signs of the plague sweeping through our nation. Too little queernitis is caused by not having enough queer content in your bloodstream. It has been known to cause hypertension, gout, and spontaneous transformations. Luckily, our top scientists at Queer & Co. have discovered a cure. Introducing Spawning Generations, Rants and Reflections on Growing Up with LGBTQ+ Parents, a book of collected essays and stories from the Queerspawn community. It's the world's first medicine to be developed as a book. Our drug, Spawning Generations, has helped people with too little queernitis across the world. So don't hesitate to go to your local bookshop today and find out what Spawning Generations can do for you. Symptoms may include, but are not limited to, thoughtful discussions, learning and growing as a human being, uncontrollable laughter, empathy, spreading the queer agenda, impressing your friends and family by seeming cultured, appreciation for the compilation CD Women and Song, a deeper understanding of the queer spawn experience. So pick up your copy today and cure your too little queernitis. Ask a doctor if Spawning Generations is right for you.
It was always my goal with this show to say the things that I didn't get to say in part 1. So I want to leave with this. It's my deepest wish to raise a queer family of my own. I want to be able to tell my children that I identify as pan and non-binary. I want to be open and honest with who I am so that they know that it's okay to be open and honest about themselves. I want to be able to take them to Pride so that they can enjoy the energy and the festivities like I did as a kid. And I want to be able to walk them through feeling like they don't have a space at Pride anymore, like I did in my teens. However, there's still a part of me that's afraid. I'm afraid of what my parents-in-law will say when my kids ask for their pronouns, like I want to teach them to. I'm afraid that they're going to have to put up with ignorant questions from well-meaning people. I'm afraid that they're going to have to put up with ignorant questions from not so well-meaning people. I'm afraid that they're going to have to deal with the same bullying and homophobia that I did as a kid.
And I'm afraid that they're not going to want to explain their family's whole story because it's too complicated or too weird, or it might ruin the day. I know that these are incredibly small worries in the grand scheme of things, especially because I'm not going to be having kids anytime soon. But when I think about my own childhood and what I learned, I want to be able to teach my kids and learn from them. But most of all, I want them to love and be loved by the people who mean the most to me in this world. And that's what my big, complicated, and wonderful queer family does best. So I know that they'll knock it out of the park. I have so many hopes and ideas and dreams. But I think I'll leave that for another program. I just want to say thank you for spending your precious time with me. There's no getting it back, so thank you. I would also like to thank Sadie Epstein-Fine and Makeda Zook for producing this piece. Thank you to Archives for hosting, and thank you again to my brother Joshua Zachariah for interviewing with me. Thank you so much to Kit Simmons and Makola Peskaruk for providing voiceover, and thank you to my lovely wife Elizabeth Tragus for editing. And a big thank you to Sea Blue for the use of their song Human. Please check their music out at Bandcamp at SEABLEU. And finally, thank you to Decoration Day for the use of the intro song Harry Goes to War and for the song you are about to hear. So please also check out their music on Bandcamp. But without further ado, here's Decoration Day with Wild Birds Unlimited off the album Makeshift Future.
Flying up a mile-wide valley, flying up a burning creek. Wonder if the wind will bring me to the place that I seek. Up above the sleeping giant, up above Lake Erie. Hoping that the waves will lead you all the way back to me. Under every sky I hope that I'll find you. There's no place for me but the place I had with you. All around the hills of Israel, all around the Holy Land, I'll follow the old green lantern to a feather in the sand. Under every sky I hope I'll find you. There's no place for me but the place I had with you. Everywhere I fly, I hope that I'll find you. There's no place for